She's done it again. Okay, I'm blaming her. She's done it again, right?
You can blame me, but
second week in a row.
Third time.
The microphone was switched off. But greetings everyone.
Everybody.
How are you all? We hope that you are well in mind, body, and soul.
Indeed.
We want you to be as productive as you can be and to benefit from the fruits of your labor. Thus, we have someone who's going to come and talk to us about wills and trusts. So remember, this is an occasion where you need to take your pens, your notepads,
most
and
definitely
get involved. Take some notes because you're going to need it, right?
Yeah.
Now, we have someone here to speak to us, and he's been in the business for 25 years. And so I'm repeating that because the microphone wasn't on.
Okay.
Right? But in that being said, right, we want to introduce you to our guest.
Yes, which is Richard Ansah from Once Wills and Trusts.
Once Wills
so
and
Richard,
Trusts.
Come on in and join us. Hello, Richard.
Hi, dude. How are you? You right? Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
It's an absolute pleasure, and thank you for coming on board because we want to educate our community and we want them to keep what they've worked hard for. Definitely. So in so saying, before we start, I'd like to ask, tell us about you.
Such a broad question.
Well, all right,
I'll keep it short.
All right, if you want to, I can condense it.
Yes.
Well,
Richard, I talk for England.
Okay, so what we want to do then is say, Richard, welcome. And what we'd like to know about you, your education, and why you've gone into this particular aspect of business.
Okay, so
your passion.
My passion. So my passion is actually to teach. That's my number one passion, is to teach. Believe it or not, my background's in engineering. I always joke and say I've got 2.5 degrees. I don't know about you, but my mum and my dad actually is very much like, Richard, you need to go to school, get all the qualifications you can, and then you'll make as much money and get paid and have a job for life. Which that was not my experience at all. But I took it literally. So I've gone to school, gone to university, 2 master's degrees. I was doing a PhD. I dropped out. That's why I said I've got 2.5 degrees.
You're a half doctor.
Yeah, you could say that. And then so I left uni at 28, believe it or not. But all through my studies, I've been working part-time as a student, and it's always been in finance, in banking especially, and law firms. So I got my experience dealing with, like, from debt collectors to helping customers with credit cards. Got my mortgage qualifications. I was a mortgage broker. I ran my own business. Did very, very well as a mortgage broker. Helped lots of people, especially self-employed and buy-to-let landlords. I myself, once upon a time, was a landlord. Between myself and my wife, we accumulated about 28 properties at one time. About 28 properties we accumulated whilst running the mortgage business and everything else. So things were, I've always been in finance, and I've always been passionate about money and banking. The reason why I got involved with trust and trust law, probably a very similar time to now. So 2006, 2007, 2008, the crash took place. I had no education. As much as I thought I was educated, I was very good as a broker, but I had no understanding about bubbles and bursting bubbles and creditors coming after you and bailiffs and protecting your assets and all that stuff. I had no understanding at all, and banking and how money actually works. So I learned the very hard way of what happens when you have to quit a business and let go of staff and all that kind of stuff. And so I said, I want to teach people not to make the same mistakes that I made. That was back in 2009. So in terms of finance, I've been doing that for a long time. Trusts, I'm an expert in that. And then I got involved with as a will company and a will trust company, really to educate people more about how to protect their assets and, more importantly, generational wealth. Generational wealth is absolutely key. And in my community, especially, I don't really see much education, especially when I'm dealing with clients now, to be able to empower them to pass wealth down to their children and their children's children, and doing it in a way that's strategic, so the wealth actually stays. Because that's how the wealthy do it. Not you actually give money in their hands and it's gone, or there's no control, or no vision for the future. And unfortunately, you see a lot of problems, especially when the death takes place. Not just in our community, every community. Families don't get on. People want their money like yesterday. And it's squandered. It's just disappeared, and we have nothing to show for it whatsoever. And what really vexed me, really, is that when I was growing up, a lot of my friends, if they're getting married or buying their house for the first time, their parents were giving them massive deposits to buy their first house. That wasn't my story. And I was like, well, how can I change that narrative? And it comes down to protecting the wealth, passing it down in the right way. And so that's what I'm all about. That's my mission, to educate families and to prepare them, allow them to understand how to do it the right way around, not a simple process where really there's no control and lots of mistakes can take place. So that's in a nutshell what I do and my background.
That is
quite
wonderful. Thank you very much. I mean,
I did tell you I could talk for England, so just stop.
Don't worry. You can ask your questions for England too. Don't worry about that. We're good. Okay, so on the basis of your extensive knowledge of the business of trust and wills and what the effects are, can we talk about what happens why do we need a will? Why do we need a trust? And then we can open up that door a little bit wider. Why do we need a will first?
Brilliant question. Everyone needs, over the age of 18, everyone needs a will. Why? I think if in one word, it's to have control in different scenarios. So I don't care how much money you do or don't have. It's not really much. It's not really a huge thing about money. It's about having control for yourself. So if you don't have a will, then our lovely friends, the government, will give you their version, and that may not be in line with what you want ultimately. So let's talk about children. You probably might be aware, if both parents pass away and you don't have a guardianship clause and your children are under the age of 18, and no will, nothing written down, and let's say the scenario could be quite just
traumatic.
Traumatic, or not smooth. There may be, family members may have access to your children. You may not get on with those family members. Maybe they have to go into care, and that child may not have a great experience for who their parents or guardians are going to be. And unfortunately, if you want to have that control to make sure your children are financially looked after, as well as looked after throughout their life, emotionally and everything else, then as a parent, you need to start planning from that now. And I think there's a big taboo about death, but we have to plan, just like a birthday, just like an anniversary. It will come around every single year. Well, birthdays and anniversaries. We will die ultimately one day. So it's nothing to fear. It's to plan and do it in the best way possible. But that's just one example. If you have wealth, accumulated wealth in some form or shape or form, whether that's property, savings, assets, how would you pass it on to your family and loved ones? If you have a tax problem and you leave it to later years, you may not be able to solve that tax problem. So a will is really very, very, very important. It's a foundation, I guess, to planning your wealth and planning generational wealth, especially. So that's
your legacy is where you leave that and you control your legacy,
Exactly.
by who you
Yeah.
divide your.
Yeah.
I suppose that's the start of the
Absolutely.
control. So you're basically have put in place, right, this is what I want happening here.
Mhm.
This is who I want to get what, so that when that time comes, there's no
need to
flummoxing
squabble
everywhere
because
and
it's been
Exactly.
it's there.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. Exactly.
So
And
here's a question on that, on the
Mhm.
will. When I draw up a will, is that it? Do I have to refresh it every 20 years or
Or can I
5
just
years,
leave
or
it?
what is there? Should I be refreshing my will accordingly?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say every 3 to 4 years, have
Mhm.
it reviewed.
Okay.
The laws changed quite considerably since sort of 2017,
Okay.
and we always hear about the reviews of the budget and things like that. So it's important to make sure your will's up to date. Also, people who you might nominate for executors or as trustees or beneficiaries, maybe they've passed on before you, maybe you don't get on with them anymore. Um, Other subtle situations you might have read in the news. Maybe you've got divorced since the last will, got remarried since the last will. If you marry or remarry, that will revoke a will, so that make the will null and void.
Oh,
Okay, so
What about
it's
that?
important if life situations change,
yeah.
we don't always think about, oh, I'll get the will done.
Yeah.
But it's actually really, really important because it can cause serious problems, absolutely serious
So
problems. I mean, yeah, just in the news the other day, I think it was 2 young boys. Mum had cancer, got married to the boy's stepfather. They were expecting to inherit 100 grand each, but it all went to the stepdad
oh,
because
okay.
she didn't do a will. She didn't renew the will. She had an old will, and once you get
Right.
married, that will is null and void. And so you get a government will, and the government says most of it goes to the spouse. So
Right.
people's situations change, so the will must be updated.
Okay. So,
Okay.
and that's a really
That's
good
a
one.
good
I
thing
hope
to know.
everyone has their notepad and pen. I know we say it when we do come on live, but sometimes there are gems like that that are dropped. Some people, yes, we know will know that information, but I'm sure there's quite a lot that may not know that. You know what I mean? That should your circumstance change, that you would need to sort of refresh and have a look at those that will again. Yeah.
Now, you said something earlier, which is the guardian clause.
Mhm.
What is that?
So guardianship. So any parent that has a child under the age of 18, a minor child, effectively. I mean, the laws updated for about 3 or 4 years ago because only mothers had parental
Yeah.
rights. But now both mothers and fathers have parental rights.
Yeah.
Is that automatic now?
Yeah, it's automatic now.
Okay.
It wasn't before, but it is now.
Yeah.
So if parents predecease their children and their children are still minors, then basically with the control, as I mentioned, goes to the state or the government to make
Okay.
decisions, unless you stipulate your wishes in writing as to what you want to see happening. So a guardianship clause does exactly that. So,
Okay.
for example, if you died without a will, obviously the government give you their version. If
Yeah.
there's no guardianship clause, that child could be in care for 6 months before they decide who is the best person to pass the child to. I've seen examples where siblings of the deceased look after the child, but they're just taking the money, spending it for themselves. The child is not being looked after, not being maintained.
Yeah.
It's just on a facade, and
Yeah.
the child's not happy at all. And the parent, if they were alive, would hate to see their children. Any parent would hate to see their child not being looked after, especially if they've made provisions for their children. You hear stories of even family back home. My mom's from Jamaica. They've been deliberately disinherited. And that's not necessarily guardianship, but
Yeah.
this whole scenario because of poor planning. So
Okay.
guardianship is extremely important if you're a parent and have children under the age of 18. Absolutely
Okay.
imperative to have.
So as you said that, Richard, I would say anyone listening in will think, okay, right. So you've told me about a will, and I need to make sure that that is up to date
Mhm.
every 3 to 4 years. So if I put a will together within that will, and I say I want my child looked after X, Y, or whoever,
Mhm.
is that separate from the will, or can that just be part of the one will that I'm putting together now?
Typically, it's done as part of the one will, but
Right.
you can have
Okay.
it separate if you want to. But typically, it's part of the same will.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how long does the process take to create a will or to have a will?
That's a good question. It's like, how long is a piece of string almost?
Okay.
I'll backtrack because the biggest challenge I have in my role is educating people, because majority of the people I come across tend to think a will's a standard will, £200, job done, that's it, I've got a will,
Yeah.
got the piece of paper,
Yeah.
Mhm.
tick the box and move on.
Yeah.
But by the time I finish educating, and especially you're down south, you own a home, you run a business, you have children, you may have savings, you receive an inheritance, you've got property abroad. Your assets could exceed, especially if you're married or if you've got an interesting blend of relationships. So you might have children from previous relationships
Yeah.
from
Mhm.
both sides. That's not a £200 will. So the planning,
Right.
quite expensive. It's quite extensive. Sorry, not expensive,
Yes.
extensive.
Yes.
Mhm.
But the challenge is the lack of education on top of it.
Right.
So I have to make sure people understand that if they want to not pay tax, inheritance tax is probably one of the only taxes that you could avoid with planning. Yeah. Um, that's a whole conversation in itself. If you run a business, there's lots of benefits and reliefs that could be claimed via the will, passing on wealth the right way via the will to your children or to beneficiaries, whoever you want them to be.
Yeah.
So a good will could take a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks to draft, review, and make sure it's done properly.
Okay.
A simple will, yeah, could be done within a few minutes, not a problem at all. It just
Yeah.
depends on everyone's personal situation, number one, and what they want to see in
Mhm.
terms of leaving a legacy for their children and for their loved ones.
So basically, people shouldn't be put off by what you're saying there, which is, it depends on your circumstance at the time and what you're
Hmm.
wishing to achieve with having your will. That ultimately, however simple you start with it, you should actually look at getting a will in place.
Yeah,
And so obviously I would say, I'm just talking about any layperson, you would just get a will, and then as things progress or you go along, you can then update it, can you, at each stage?
absolutely. Because
Yeah.
the older we get, typically the wealthier you get. If you have more children, starting to own properties, if you have
Mm.
buy-to-let or investment properties, etc., then if it's not catered for in the will and a death event takes place, probate is a very long
Yeah.
process, can be extremely expensive process, can be very painful for family members. So I'll give you a real, I say in my mind, simple example. Someone passes away, they own a home, the home still has a mortgage on it, no life insurance. Yeah.
Okay.
And so simple will, so the family member who maybe be an executor has to now find out, well, I need to sell the house to pay, let's say there's an inheritance tax liability of £20,000, but there's no £20,000 cash, there's no money to pay the funeral bills, there's no
Yeah.
planning at all. Okay. So now it becomes stressful for the family members. Stressful, they don't know what they want to see in the funeral or the burial. Stressful because the mortgage company's going to repossess the house unless there's finances to pay it off.
Hey, yeah.
They can't sell the house because it's not in their name yet because there's no probate. So it's because of a vicious circle.
Yeah,
Purely
that
because of
story.
It is.
just because of they may have even had a simple will, but they didn't get the right advice. And in my industry, what I'm finding is a lot of people can flog a will because it's an unregulated industry. It's not like pensions or financial advice where you're regulated. I
Mhm.
mean, I self-regulate, but it's not a regulated industry. So
Right.
Okay.
without the right advice, you don't know if you're getting the best advice from
And
Yeah.
you're not
advisors.
sure if you're climbing the
And
right hurdles to get
exactly, and
over
then
those. Yeah.
it could cause serious problems.
Okay.
So really and truly, you need to get someone who's a professional who understands what they're talking about, rather than doing it yourself, or finding someone who can do it for the cheapest amount, and make sure every ounce of some situation circumstance has been discussed. Every time I come out of a meeting, I'd say 9 times out of 10, it's like, oh, I didn't think about that. I never would have thought about that question. I would never have thought about this scenario, because there's never, death is not something you think about, and so
or you discuss.
and planning long term as to who you want to manage this, and how do you want things distributed, what age do you want it to be passed on, how do you want it to be passed on, etc., etc. These are things that will empower you once it's done, because the plan is done and the plan is ready to be implemented. But also, you're getting the best advice for what you're paying for. That's really what's important.
Okay.
I mean,
now, sorry. Within that, now, let's talk about the practical. I want to have a will done. Do I have to come to your office, or can we have what's the scenario? Is there an interview? Is there an interview? Can we talk over the phone, or do it webinar or whatever it is?
So I rarely go to people's homes. I had a client age 94. I went to her home, right?
Okay.
But other than that, normally it would normally start off with a phone call or online conversation, just to educate and get a gist of what the scenario is and what's required. And depending on the situation, I'm not averse to going to someone's home. I would normally go, especially for execution of the will, to make sure it's signed. But typically it can all be done online. Just depends on the comfort of the client I'm speaking to, and the scenario that's required, to be fair. Because a lot of the work that I do is, and sometimes I don't use the word will writer. My title is not will writer. I'm a private client advisor, because the will is just a tool. I consult, so I need to find out what's the problem, what's your goal, what's your ideal world, how do we solve it. And that may be a will required. There could be other things required. So it's just making sure that education process is relayed quite nicely during the conversation.
Okay, so that's good, because one of the things I just want to make sure was that people recognize the pointers, right? In terms of, one, when creating the will, they need to speak to someone. Oh, there was another question I was going to ask you. When you've completed the will and they've signed it, do they have to go to a solicitor to sort of affirm it, or you're working with them to get it signed? That is enough.
So that's a good question. And I say that it's a good question because I'm a lawyer. I studied the law.
Okay.
Will writing, there's a Wills Act 1837. There's a whole load of acts, Inheritance Tax Act, Capital Gains Tax, etc., that I have to understand to give advice. So I'm not a solicitor, but I'm a private client lawyer. I give advice, and I'm regulated to give advice on that, and I can be sued. I have insurance of £2.5 million to make sure I can give the best advice possible, and I study extremely hard to make sure I give the clients the best advice possible. So on top of that, I'm duty bound to make sure that whoever I speak to is compos mentis. Then they're able to understand that they're giving a gift away. They understand that they have the knowledge, and they are happy to and have the capacity to give and distribute their gifts away. I can be sued if I gave a will or drafted a will for somebody, because it is drafting the will. It's a legal document, and the family complain to say, well, that person didn't even have mental capacity to even write a will, etc., etc. All these things are very, very important. Okay, so from that point of view, and I get that question a lot, and that's why I have to address it that way. So I am a lawyer from that point of view, and I give advice. So I make sure that I execute any will that I draft. I want to be there to make sure that it's signed correctly. Because if a will's not signed, it's not valid. If the will's not found, it doesn't exist. Okay. Copies are not good enough. So
you countersign it.
So you'd have two witnesses are required, and I'd be one of them, and have another independent witness. No family members, no spouses, etc. Just completely independent to say they saw that person sign that will on this day.
Okay. So next, we'd like to talk to you about trusts.
Yes.
And so we're going to have a short break before, but there's a question I'm going to sort of leave on the edge for people to think about in terms of trust. When you have a trust, can you it's difficult to ask this question because I'm not too sure if I'm going to frame it in the right way. But with a trust, can you be in a situation where the trust pays you, so you can pay your salary into the trust? You then are paid by the trust. So effectively, a policeman can't stop you and take your car away because it's being paid for by the trust, kind of thing. It's not owned by you.
Hold that thought.
Is that a good question?
Is that a good question?
It's a good question, but
Okay.
it's a good question.
Don't answer. Hold on to that question.
We'll come back to that one. We'll come back to that. For anybody that missed the show last week, we did reveal who the final three for the
£10,000
business
development loan.
So we're just going to give you a quick recap, and then we'll be back to see if Richard can answer that question. See you soon.
Hi everyone, Daryl Chambers here from Empower Academy CIC, a social enterprise based out of the city of Wolverhampton. We work within the city and work with young people in the city around transformative change. We use martial arts as the catalyst, as the vehicle to achieve this change. Martial arts has been known to have more than just a physical output, right? There is a spiritual and also a mental element attached to martial arts. So it's the perfect vehicle for holistic change in young people and to transform communities. The range of services we offer include an early intervention, group intervention service, which is a journey of self-discovery with young people working on emotional and social skills. In secondary and primary schools, it's a 12-week journey. They learn skills such as mindfulness, journaling, and emotional regulation. We have a one-to-one bespoke mentoring services. We have a alternative provision that we opened up, and we have free community sessions all around the idea of empowering the youth of the city, because they are next up. So we need to make sure we're really, really investing in them. And what better way to invest in them than just let them know where their potential is, and their potential sky high. So that's Empower Academy.
Welcome to Tropical Box. We are located by Hackney Road. We are committed to bringing the highest quality and most flavorful fruit to our customers by promoting sustainability and fair trade practices. We believe by providing our customers with the freshest, most delicious fruit available, we can help promote healthy eating habit and a more sustainable future. Our services include fruit boxes, corporate boxes, fruit platters, smoothies and cold pressed juices, to name a few. We also offer tropical infused vegan breakfasts and lunches. Perfect start to your day if you would like a burst of energy or midday pick-me-up. Whether you're after a healthy snack or a refreshing drink or a flavorful meal, we have something for everyone. We are committed to providing our customers with the best possible experience through the quality of our produce and our sustainability practices. Come and experience Tropical Box and come and taste the taste of the tropics for yourself.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth. I'm a young entrepreneur and I recently launched my first brand, True Skin. True Skin is a cosmetics brand that aims to increase diversity and inclusion in the cosmetics industry through our sustainable products that stimulate healthy skin through prioritizing ethnic consumer needs and wants, creating more option and choice for women. Inspiration for True Skin came from my personal core values of encouraging others to feel confident, empowered, and most importantly, embraced. Inclusivity and creativity are at the forefront of all of our product design and at the heart of True Skin. It's important for our customers to feel like that they are being represented and they can see someone who reminds them of themselves. Since launching True Skin, I've been invited to deliver many inspirational talks at the London Chambers of Commerce, speak to postgrad students and other aspiring entrepreneurs. I've also had the opportunity to do our first pop-up shop, which was very successful, receive mentorship from people like Tej Lafani and Levi Ritz, who are on Dragon's Den, and many other opportunities, and we're currently in our scaling phase. My dream for True Skin is to become a well-known and established beauty brand that's known for putting diversity and inclusion first. And I would also love to see True Skin have some physical presence at retail shops like Selfridges, Harvey & Nichols, and Harrods. Thank you very much for watching.
Hey.
Well, there you have it. Those
We're
are
back.
our 3 finalists. And, you know, one of those are going to win the £10,000 business development loan. We're doing it for our community, and we want you to support us. So we want to see you on the 15th of April. That's another conversation.
Yeah.
Right now, we're back. And, you know, Richard, I asked you a question earlier on, and in the ad break, I had a moment to think about it. With a trust, if you set up a trust, the property that you own is owned by the trust. They take care of that property. So if you are in a situation where somebody wants to come and take your property, they can't, because it belongs to a trust and not you. You may live in it and do the things that you do, but so have I framed it correctly now?
Absolutely. It's funny you say that, because the reason why I called my business Once, it means own nothing, control everything. And you probably have heard us saying that the secret to wealth is to own nothing, control everything. So it's all about trust. Trust is the best vehicle for that.
Please. Everybody, we
did you hear that?
Where is your notepad and pen, everybody? You need to write that down and remember it.
Own nothing, control everything. That's
quite powerful.
That is
that's so true.
Absolutely.
You know, earlier on, you said about our parents who taught us to go to college, get our degrees, get our education up to scratch, buy our property, and, you know, live a good life. That was the skill set that our parents had at that time. We have lived that life, but we now need to go to the next one, securing our foundation and our legacy. And so please continue. I do apologize for
that was quite powerful.
So say that again.
Yeah, so the secret to wealth is to own nothing and control everything. Yeah, that's probably, if you've got a notepad, that's the first thing to write down. And the second thing to write down is wealth is not how much money you make, as you just said, Huw, it's how much money you keep. All right.
Okay.
And that's really my mission. All right, to help people to get down that road. So, you know, a will is a foundation. But the thing about a will is it doesn't become alive until someone dies.
Yeah.
And so the protection, you could lose all your wealth before you die. Purely down to poor decision making, situations outside of your control, etc., etc. And so the reasons why trusts are very powerful is because they're active during your lifetime. And so you can put yourself in a situation where you literally are, you know, broke on paper, but living life as a king or queen.
Right.
And that's really where, for me, the fun starts, and understanding how they work. Because you can get yourself in trouble with them if you don't understand how they work. But once you understand the whole system, then it's actually very, very powerful to utilize for the right reasons.
Okay. So I think we need to explore how they work, because how the trusts work. So please explain that for the layperson like myself who wants to know, because we have enough yards, so I want to protect them all.
The simplest way I can describe how a trust works is so this pen in my hands, if you can see it, I've got my background on, so you can't probably be clouded. But if I own this pen, and I'll say to, Huw, I'm giving you this pen to look after. But when my daughter, when she needs it, to either for university or to for signing her book or whatever, you need to provide it for her. All right, I'll give you the ink. Okay, I'll give you the funds to maintain it. But if I'm not here, if I'm not around, it's your job to make sure that my daughter gets the pen when she needs it. Now, are you okay with that, Huw?
Yes, I'm fine with that. Yep.
Yeah. So I've just created a trust, literally. So I'm the one who created the trust, and the one who creates the trust is known as a settlor. Okay. The one who administrates or manages a trust is a trustee. That's you, and then my daughter's the beneficiary, and so she'll enjoy the use of that pen. So the fact that it depends on her person and she's using it, it's not hers, but she's known as a beneficial owner. She can enjoy it, but she doesn't have any responsibility over it, or any legal responsibility over it, which is basically where the problem comes in terms of taxation and issues and all that kind of stuff. So literally, if you own it, you're going to pay tax.
Right. Okay. All right. So that's
or they can take it. So if it's not yours, they can't take it. They can't tax it.
Okay. So what about the trust then? If the trust owns it, can the trust be you know, taken, or that money can be taken from the trust? What?
No, because the manager of the trust, so that'd be you, Huw,
Mhm.
has a fiduciary responsibility. So that the trust is there. So ultimately, if you're found, not you personally, Huw, but if the trustee is found to be dishonest or using methods that are unconscionable, then that's prison time, literally,
Okay.
until they correct the situation.
Okay.
So
Wow.
it's a big duty to be a trustee.
Yeah.
It's not something to take lightly.
Yeah, I will say that there are a few questions.
Questions are coming now.
People are asking. Okay, and there is one that was just placed here, which is what happens when your daughter doesn't need the pen any longer, as we're using that as a analogy.
So it's a great question. So it depends on me who set the trust up. If I've given the trustee enough rules or express my wishes and give them enough power and flexibility to make decisions outside of my remit, then if my daughter no longer needed the pen, if I gave the trustee enough power, they could sell that pen, realize the money, and invest that on behalf. Everything has to be done for my daughter's benefit. So it depends on the power that I give the trustee. So there are different types of trusts. There's 3 types of trusts that you should be aware of in the UK. There's something called a bare trust or an absolute trust, which is basically just that. You're just a nominee. You're holding it on behalf of
A bare trust, a
bare trust, BARE, or an absolute trust. So literally, you're just the trustee's a nominee. They've not got any power at all. They're just holding this pen on behalf of the beneficiary. And once the beneficiary reaches the right age, historically is on the age of majority or reach 18, then they can take the power away from the trustee and say, well, I want that pen for myself. So that's probably used in certain situations. You probably find most standard wills has a bare trust. And so it's not the best type of trust to utilize. But I find that most solicitors will never tell you that. They just say, yeah, it's in trust, it's protected, no problem, but it's not the right type of trust. And so the property is not protected and you realize, oh, there's problems. The other one is called a discretionary type of trust. And that's where the trustee has absolute power and they make all the interesting decisions. Whilst the settlor is alive, they can change certain things. But once the settlor passes away, the trustee has absolute scope to make every choice because they have discretion. And so the asset's protected absolutely because it doesn't actually belong to the beneficiary. All right.
Okay. So the question here is around the Britney Spears situation where her father was the trustee. Is that the kind of thing that we're talking about here, where the father
is that
makes
a discretionary? Would that have come under a discretionary trust?
Potentially, because in America it's slightly different, but ultimately,
yeah.
If both based on the behaviour, that's probably the best way to look at it. If the trustee has gone away and squandered all the money and done everything, and they've acted quite unquote unconscionable, then the beneficiary has to sue that trustee and deal with the trustee in the right way, and they have to get recompense in one way, shape, or form.
Okay. All right. So you said that. So you've got the bare trust, the discretionary trust. Are those the only 2? You said there's a third one.
There's a third one. It's a bit more of a hybrid. Not to get too technical, where it's just called a life interest trust, and they have a lot of benefits. I'm not going to go into too much detail now, but they have a lot of benefits too. So ultimately, it's just having someone who understands their use, but more importantly, using them to solve a problem or situation that may either come around or to prevent a problem from taking place. So that's where you're going to start using trusts going forward. So typically, if it's for inheritance tax planning or for asset protection, is really the main purposes of why trusts will be utilized, and for generational wealth, what we call bloodline planning, to pass down the wealth, maybe skip a generation or 2. And pass it down to grandchildren, great grandchildren, etc.
Right. Okay. So that is quite an extent. That one's a bit more extensive, and one that could, you would discuss if people are interested in that kind of in that one. So again, people, you can we'll give you details of where to contact Richard if all of this is very much interesting to you. And there is somebody that's put on there if we're going to see you at the event, but that's maybe a question. That's not
the question. I think my question comes up in Richard. what we've spoken about so far, as I understand it, it's about the personal trust and wills and so on. Is there a difference in terms of business wills and trusts and so on? Yeah.
I think a lot of it's down to terminology and
Yeah.
and use. Okay,
Okay.
but in terms of a trust is a trust is a trust, and it does a job.
Okay.
Yeah.
You just got to get the right advice as to how you want that job done,
Right.
and what
Okay.
the outcome will be. And this is where it starts to get very technical and challenging.
Mm.
All I'd like to say is, rather than talking about the vehicle,
Yeah. Okay.
I want to address more dealing with certain problems and why
Okay.
trusts are really, really powerful.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
for example, I have a lot of clients, colleagues who, maybe they're vulnerable in one way, shape, or form, or they have their children who are vulnerable. Maybe they've got some type of a mental disorder or challenge. They're on benefits of some form. And sometimes I've found that their parents haven't taken into consideration how they're going to pass an inheritance down to the child,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot, especially in our community with like mental health, if benefits are means tested, and it's given, and the gift is given in the wrong way. This is what I'm talking about, the type of gift you make. If you do it absolutely as opposed to via a trust,
Okay.
then those benefits could be completely lost.
Yeah.
And the individual has no recourse at all, especially once a person has died, as to how to utilize that inheritance in the right way. So a well-structured will with good advice would actually, let's set up a specific trust to protect this vulnerable individual so that their wealth is not interrupted during their
Yeah.
lifetime.
I
And
was
they can.
actually gonna come on to that one, because
Okay, cool.
while she was speaking,
Mm.
I was thinking exactly about that. Vulnerable people, because we do have children that may have needs and so on, and obviously as they get into adulthood, that might be the child and the parent, or the two children have disability. So how then would the parent then long term look at protecting them, and how would any kind of assets that they have automatically, you would say, would go to the children once they've done the will and so on? But if they do have disabilities, how then does that work? Or how would you put something in place to protect them?
So it all spans on the individual needs and wishes, but it's purely down to, it can be done via trust. If it's an emergency scenario, it can be done. It can be done via will rather. And if it's an emergency scenario, it can be done via a trust and a will. And I tend to draft them to work in tandem.
Right.
So it's down to individual scenarios. It's also I haven't spoken about the big word, inheritance tax, and that can also be a
we wanted to
big
deal with that
challenge.
one. Yeah.
And there's a lot of financial benefits that the government don't really speak about that have been written in law to benefit vulnerable people. So you can be quite clever in what you do to protect them during lifetime, especially. So everyone's individual situation is going to be different and have different merits. So it's important to speak to the right person to get the right advice. Not just for vulnerable scenarios, it could be any situation. It could be, blended families. I mean, I've had interesting ones. I've had one with one guy's got multiple mistresses, and one mistress doesn't know that the other one exists, and his children are both mistresses, and he wants to give gifts to both sets of families, but the one hand can't know what the left hand can't know what the right hand's doing. Do you understand? And that even though I can't be judgmental, I can't be,
of course,
I have to serve the client as the best way possible. So what tools are required for that? Scenarios, 7, 8 kids, 2 or 3 not talking to the mum or dad. They want to disinherit the children. What kind of advice is required if they get remarried, or they are remarried, and one spouse has got their own set of wealth, the other spouse has their own set of wealth. They don't want the kids to to be disinherited. Sometimes the will's drafted wrong, and you tell them what would happen if they didn't get it upgraded, and oh, I got the wrong advice. Something the most popular one is, putting kids' names on a house, thinking that would get rid of inheritance tax. Probably the worst thing you could really do.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Absolutely, yeah, because everyone thinks of inheritance tax, but there's another one called capital gains. I don't know if anyone's heard of that.
Yeah.
And so if you use the example of the pen again, if this pen was worth, if I bought it for £1 and it's now worth £20,000, and I gave this to Huw, I've got a capital gains tax liability.
You have or I have?
I have, because I've given any disposal of wealth, whether you sell it, or give it away, will trigger capital gains.
So
if I put my child on a house, say I give them £50,000, and because they're not named on it, and if I bought the house, say, for 100 grand 20 years ago, it's now worth £1 million now. There's a huge gain that's accrued over time.
Yeah.
And so to gift that away, the taxman's going to be knocking on your door, but most people don't realize that. So it's
you
really
can't gift it.
No, unless you do it the right way. So you can make a gift, don't get me wrong, but you got to do it in the right way, and you got to know how to make gifts. So cash, for example, you can't get capital gains on cash. Certain instruments don't trigger capital gains tax.
What do you mean by instruments? Sorry, what do you mean by instruments?
So a trust is an instrument, a will is an instrument. Okay. So there'll be other investments would have classed as instruments. So you need to get the right advice based on what you want to do. So it's always good to get consultation. Say, well, this is what I want to achieve. How do I go about doing it? And speaking to someone who will give you the right advice, because not everyone understands.
So to recap, then, because this has been so informative, and there is another question that somebody wants to ask, but basically, get yourself a will, a trust, and actually, no, I'm going to start again. If you get yourself a will, but get the correct advice first.
Yes.
How can I'm again always talking as a layperson? How do I know who that is? I mean, I'm talking to you, Richard, who is a lawyer by trade. But if I don't, how do I go about doing my own due diligence then?
To ensure that we get the right person. We are speaking to you, but in essence, as a general rule, what would you recommend that people look for to get the right person to create a will for them?
That's a really good question. I would say that they're at the very minimum part of a regulated body. So, for example, I'm part of Society of Trust and Estate Practitioners, which is probably more of a gold standard. You got the Society of Will Writers. You got the Institute of Will Writers. There's like 2 or 3 of them, and if they're registered and they've got a code of practice and they've signed up to that, and the reason why it's important. So, for example, with the Society of Will Writers, if I was halfway through drafting a will and something happened to me, how do you get your money back? How do you get your will sorted out? Like, where's your recourse? Where's your insurance?
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing that people need to have a way you need to find them and get them on obviously find them on the website and see if they're actually registered or not. The other thing is test their knowledge. I'm big on education. A lot of, and I don't want to sound negative online, but you got to be careful if someone's trying to flog you a product. And so ask as much intelligent questions as you possibly can. And how do you feel about the response that you're getting? A lot of clients say to me, I just didn't take to the person who was speaking to me. I thought that they were trying to sell me something, etc., etc. So you've got to be comfortable that you're getting the education, and you know that this document that you have, once it's finished, it's going to do the job that you intended to do, and not something else by mistake. But ultimately, if they're registered with some regulated, a body that regulates the industry, that's really, really important. If you want the cream of the crop, then a step regulated will writer or trust expert would be the way to go.
The way to go. Excellent.
Okay, so here's the awkward question then. How would I know if something goes wrong? Is there an ombudsman that I can actually get in touch with to say, hey, this is where it's at. This is what I thought I was getting. I'm not getting that. Is there
a recourse?
Regulated body.
So the recourse would be via a regulated body. So you'd have a complaints procedure. because not even you, it could be the family members. If a death event took place and something opposite took place to what the will was supposed to be saying that was happening, that could be grounds for complaint.
Okay.
And so it's an official procedure that can take place
Okay.
if required.
Yeah, you've been amazing. I mean, there are questions.
There are
and
loads of questions.
I hope you don't mind. So, obviously, going back
Mhm.
to the questions. So, to clarify, somebody's written here. So, to clarify, do trust assets differ in different countries, i.e., properties in different countries?
So repeat the question. Do trusts
To
assets differ?
clarify,
Okay.
do trust assets differ in different countries? So properties. So if you've got properties in different countries,
Mhm.
do the trust assets differ for each one? I think that's maybe.
It's a bit of a, when you start going out offshore, shall we say, not all countries recognize trusts. So you need to get the right advice as to get the same result, if it makes any sense. So if you had a trust over here, but you're living in Gibraltar or
Yeah.
Spain or whatever, then obviously your property is still ring fenced. The trust is still doing its job based on the law over here. But if you had a property in Spain, to put that into a trust, Spain don't recognize trust, so you need to get the right advice on how to ring fence those type of assets.
Okay.
So it's passed down to family members in the right way. So
Yeah.
you need expert advice on that.
Expert on that one.
Yeah, and other than that, if you're in a jurisdiction that does recognize trust, especially offshore trust, and yeah, they're very, very powerful. The only thing that they're probably not as powerful as they used to be is more to do with taxation.
Okay.
But in terms of asset protection, then yeah, absolutely they do their job.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. And I'm gonna just put a last one up here. If coming back to if you sold your child or told your child you can have the house, if you sold it to them, can you sell them the house for a reduced value?
As in I can sell it to you for £1.
Yeah. Will that
Well,
then?
during lifetime, you're saying, or
Yeah. In terms of for the capital gains tax, as you were saying earlier. If you were to put your child's name,
the taxman will never buy it. he just want to work. I mean, you could, but it doesn't defeat the object.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't defeat the object. There are ways. There are definitely ways to defer capital gains. I wouldn't say avoid it, but to defer it.
Well,
But
we can keep that, because I think that you're due a couple more visits here. Believe me,
okay.
right?
Okay.
And so we'll be looking at that, because those are crucial elements of how we protect our own assets and how we ensure that our children receive the legacy. And do remember, people, that those trusts that you do to create that legacy, it's not yours. What you're doing is you're protecting it for the future of the future children, right? So, don't think of it as in, I have got this, I'm doing this for me. Because what you are doing, you're making sure that the children that you leave behind have got something that they can account for and to move on. And you educate them to that point that they can pass it on as well. Yeah. So, that is something to, keep that in mind.
So, Richard, we're nearly coming to the end of the show now, but if people wanted to contact you, how can they contact you if they want to?
That's fine. Probably email is best for me, but obviously everyone have their own method of contact. So my email address is just admin.
Right, I'm going to pop that on. Bear with me 1 second. I'm doing this live, everyone. So, okay. So go ahead for me.
So it's admin.
Yeah.
At oncewillsandtrust.com.
Lovely. Admin at Once Wills and Trusts, yeah?
Yeah. .com. I am on Facebook, so you can definitely search Once Wills and Trust on Facebook.
Okay, wonderful. Right, so I'll put this one up, and then we will share the other information later on. So as you can see, yeah, that's given the details of exactly what Richard and his company does, and it does have, there you go, admin@oncewillsandtrusts.com. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's where you'll be able to find Richard, or just email him any questions that you'll have, and I am sure that he will get back to you.
And also, can I say to everyone, go on to the Black Business Recommendation YouTube channel. You will see this possibly later on today, definitely tomorrow. You can watch it again, take your pen and paper, make some pointers, get in touch with Richard and get that service done. Your will and your trust, right? And get yourself that appointment. All you need to do is make that call.
Yeah. So, Richard, we're coming to the end of the show now. I did say there are people that have been asking if you will be coming to the event. Obviously, that is something I am sure.
Don't put a man under pressure.
I am not. It's the viewers that point. I'm sure, because I'm sure.
Richard, you know what they're saying?
Yeah.
They want to pick your brain when you get down there,
Pick your brain.
right? Because they're networking with you. So, you know, it's worth the while to get down there to network with those people who are here. Because now they've seen your face, they recognize you, you get some questions.
Yeah.
So you better bring your briefcase.
But you know, it's also really good as well for the community, and that's why we're here as Black Business Recommendation, because we want to share these great businesses that we do have within us, and the knowledge base that we have to share to everybody. All right, and I'm sure that there are lots of bits of information here that Richard has shared tonight that most of us may not have known about. And even if we did know something, I'm sure he's
Here's a man who's qualified that conversation.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
All right. But Richard, it has been lovely speaking with you.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you so much.
Pleasure to have you on this evening and to have a.
And we'll be calling you back. That's a guarantee.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me. I do appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're
you.
welcome. Thank you so much, everybody. Throughout the evening, you would have seen that the barcode has been up there in regards to the BBR event. We do have the Easter special. As you can see, the clocks went forward, so we all lost an hour's sleep, but we gained more daylight, which is really lovely.
Which is really good.
All right, so we hope that you can click on there and take advantage of the special.
Put the link on. Put the other bar on.
Yeah, that you can take advantage of the special, which is only lasting until Friday. All right. So do go and have a look and get your tickets now for the event.
So just copy that. Yeah, use your camera and click onto that. You will see it will give you the directions and everything else you need, the information about the event. Just take your camera, click onto it.
Yeah, we're trying to be fancy, you see, and up to date and all technical. All right. So if you wish to find out more and purchase your tickets, your special ticket, then do so. Okay. But it has been a pleasure this evening to have you on again, Richard.
Thank you.
As again, the knowledge has been immense,
Wonderful.
right, and
Thank
very
you very
well
much.
received by everyone. And I'm sure when people watch this on the replay,
watch it on the replay and tell your friends to watch it.
Yeah,
Because there's no point it being there on a replay. Tell your friends to watch it so that they can actually learn and get in touch with Richard, because we need to spread this. Remember one thing, right? That we have our elders and they have bought their properties. Now, they're not used to this modern technology stuff. And if we don't show them the right way, many of us will lose the homes that we lived in, because it will go to the government.
Yeah.
On
So
their,
share the knowledge that
you've
received and got tonight.
So
and
you
as
can
we
keep
said,
it.
you can get in contact with Richard, okay, and we will share those details again. All right. Okay. But for now, have a great week ahead. Go and get your tickets. Click onto the barcode. All right. And this is the type of thing that we're trying to do and showcase. Okay. So have a lovely week, Huw.
Everyone, enjoy yourselves. Be productive. Yeah, because whatever you do, it's about the future of your kids.
All right.
Bless it.
Take care, everyone.
Thank
Glorious
you.
week ahead.
Take
Bye-bye
care.
now.
Bless it.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.